In the city of Athens, where marble temples gleamed beneath the Attic sun and civic duty was the soul of life, the household the Okos stood as the foundation of society. Here, marriage was not a sanctuary of affection, but a contract forged not in love, but in lineage. An Athenian woman entered marriage at 15 as most girls of her time did. Her husband, a man twice her age, was chosen by their father. There were no vows of love or promises of partnership. The union had one purpose: to secure heirs, preferably sons, and preserve the Okos. A dowry passed hands lent. Silver, perhaps a servant, not a gift, but an insurance policy, legally mandated and socially expected. It was a hedge against uncertainty, a way for her natal family to secure her well-being in a world where women could not own property or represent themselves in court. For years, she lived as mistress of her husband's home, bearing children, weaving wool, managing slaves. But something changed. One night, her husband returned home early. The door was unlatched. A man not a relative was inside. Caught in the act, the stranger had no defense. Under Athenian law, he could legally kill him then and there. He chose instead to drag him through the streets, beaten and humiliated. The crowd jeered. The man's name would be remembered not with honor, but with shame. But the true consequence fell upon the wife. In Athens, moicheia, adultery committed by a woman, was no private matter. It was a legal offense, a threat to the sanctity of inheritance. The husband had no choice. He was required to divorce her. If he didn't, he himself could be accused of moicheia, a narrow mean effectively pimping his wife. The shame clung to her like dust to sandals. Though the law allowed him to keep the children, and he did, he was also required to return her dowry. Failing to do so could result in a lawsuit from her Kyrios, her male guardian, a rare protection the law afforded women. But not all divorces ended in scandal. Another woman was sent back to her father's house after 10 years of marriage. No children, no sons, and thus no future for her in her husband's lineage. No explanation was needed, no court proceedings, just a message to her Kyrios, and she was gone. This too was legal. A man in Athens could divorce his wife for almost any reason. A political alliance soured, her presence displeased him, or he simply wished to marry another woman with a better dowry. He performed apopempsis, the act of sending her away. No fault needed, no jouch, no ceremony. The dowry, once again, had to be returned. This financial obligation discouraged capricious divorce, but it did little to prevent it when lineage was at stake. And yet, though rare, a woman could seek divorce too. Take the case of a woman who endured years of mistreatment. Her husband beat her. Isolated and ashamed, she turned to her brother. He stood by her, and together they approached the Archon Dasilaus, the magistrate responsible for religious and family matters. Here, she performed a palimpsest divorce initiated by a woman. But it wasn't easy. She had to appear in person before the Archon, a step meant to be intimidating. She had no lawyer, no vase. Her brother, her Kyrios, spoke on her behalf. The Archon did not deny or approve the divorce. It was administrative, not judicial. But the process was public, awkward, and often discouraged by society. A woman bold enough to leave her husband might be viewed as unruly, or worse, unchaste. Even so, cases like hers appeared in speeches by the order Demosthenes. One woman left her husband because he forced her into unnatural sexual acts. Abuse, though rarely discussed, was a known, if uncomfortable, cause for separation. Sometimes, it was not the woman or her husband who acted, but her guardian. If she was young, or a widow returned to her father's house, her Kyrios could annul the marriage on her behalf, especially if the union no longer served the family's interests, economic, political, or social. Marriage was always a contract, and like any contract, it could be dissolved when it no longer benefited the involved parties. Once divorced, the woman returned home. She had no right to her children, who remained with their father. In Athens, custody wasn't a matter of dispute. Children, especially sons, were not seen as individuals with rights, but as bearers of lineage and property. They belonged to the father's Okos. Even daughters, though less documented, stayed with their fathers until marriage. Then they too would be transferred like dowry, like land, to another man's household. The woman, meanwhile, faced a future shaped by her family. A guardian would often arrange a second marriage. Her reputation, her sophrosyne, or modesty mattered. A woman's worth was tied to her ability to bear children, manage a household, and remain chaste. There was no formal stigma to divorce in Athens, but a woman's prospects still depended on how quietly and honorably she returned to her natal home. And yet, the standards were not equal. A man could sleep with concubines or visit brothels without legal consequence. His sexual infidelity was not considered morcheia. It did not threaten the bloodline. The law cared only for legitimate children and property. A woman, however, risked everything. Adultery was not just a betrayal, it was a legal crisis, a threat to order, a stain on the oikos. The Athenian law on divorce appeared, on the surface, neutral. It permitted both men and women to leave marriages. It protected the dowry, it avoided religious or moral judgment. But beneath the surface, the power was imbalanced. Men had full legal agency. Women had voice only through their guardians. Divorce for a man was simple, private, and expected. For a woman, it was complicated, public, and rare. And yet in that sliver of space, where a woman could stand before the archon and speak through her guardian, lay the faint echo of autonomy, a subtle defiance against the tide of patriarchy. Whether by scandal, sorrow, or quiet resignation, divorce in Athens was not an end but a return. A woman went home, re-entered her father's household, and awaited her next chapter, often another marriage, arranged not for affection, but for alliance. In the city where Socrates questioned the soul and democracy was forged in stone, the private world of women remained bound by silence, law, and legacy, that their stories stitched through legal speeches, whispered in courtrooms, and carved into family records endure still.